probably one of the first most notable after Columbine of school shooting tragedies in our country, where 20 first graders and 6 staff in the school of Sandy Hook Elementary in Newtown, Connecticut were killed.
What's your advice to the youngsters at this point when their leaders aren't able to understand? They may be the other side of the spectrum. They would be like, why everyone is teaching us? What's your maybe top 1, 2, 3 things for them so that they remove all this anxiety? And what would be your answer to those people who said like, oh, I have like 25, 30 people and I don't have time seriously to talk to them one-on-one. What exactly, where you are right now doing a lot of stuff, but how exactly it started? And just enlighten us something about your past life and what that process looks into and how you end up writing book and founding companies. If people do not know about Sandy Hook, if you would like to elaborate a bit.
It happened in December of 2012. One of those tragedies when there are school shootings or anything that is referred back to.
Because of these cultural or not maybe say generational gap of the way how they started their work.
I think the younger generations right now are dealing with a lot of different social anxieties, not as good of relational skills as previous generations were.
You mentioned that they used to walk to school. Now that is totally different perspective. I used to bike.
Right.
These kids use all those e-bikes. So what's your say that, I mean, there's always a friction amongst different generations. So what's your take on that?
Yeah.
They may be the other side of the spectrum. They would be like, why everyone is teaching us or why we are helped, like as if we are not ready yet. We are those people in a digital age that always need help. Or is it something they can get something good out of us from it?
Back to your point, I know from our research that people want to be able to talk about what they're dealing with. They're holding all of these challenges in, and leaders aren't available. They're stressed too much. They don't know how to tackle this space. And so you have these generations not talking to each other.
What exactly they do to make sure that they're not getting into that domain? Because everyone read through a lot of things and they say, oh, this is, you have taken totally out of context. What's your maybe top 1, 2, 3 things for them so that they remove all this anxiety and talk to their reportees?
I think relationships always are built on a lot of small interactions, right? You think of your best friends, it's just a lot of shared experiences, a lot of conversations. And the old way at work, when you would have a one-on-one, what was it? It was an hour.
From your experiences, you talked to a lot of organizations, like you came to Microsoft and other organizations as well. What are some of the top questions you can ask, which makes you think that, yeah, these are always like, these are one of the most frequent questions and where we can connect with you as well?
Let's talk. Let's talk.
My perspective, what I've learned, her work is rooted in human connections and specifically those awkward, often avoided spaces, which the true leadership comes up out there. She also, I think, and if I recall, she has gone through some of the things on I would say, I just try to remember. She did mention about some real support, which doesn't always come from the therapy or self-care. It's always, or I would say, often starts with the friends, managers, and teammates. I can go on, but let's try to talk to her, and because I think I'm sure that she can very better articulate than me. So without much further ado, please join in and welcome Jen Marr. Jen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Saurabh. Great to be here.
I really appreciate that. So I try to do some justice, but what I have not covered is what exactly, where you are right now doing a lot of stuff, but how exactly it started? If you can just enlighten us something about your past life and what that process looks into and how you end up writing book and founding companies.
Yeah, well, we all have journeys and they're all interesting, right? And I never set out to do this work. I never thought this is what I would be doing in my life. My background is international business development in the healthcare sector. I had 3 young daughters and the international travel was too much when they were young. So I took a career break and ended up being close to the Sandy Hook Elementary tragedy when 20 first graders were killed, and ended up being going in there and supporting that school. I was there for 5 years, bringing support in the aftermath of that. Also, 4 months after that tragedy was 700 yards from the finish line at the Boston Marathon when the bombs went off. And I had dedicated that mile 26 to the staff and students and families of Sandy Hook. And it kind of took me into this deep dive of human suffering and how our relational behaviors and how we support each other through hardship have really kind of been frayed and are kind of unraveling.
So
And
before you go ahead, sorry to interrupt. If people do not know about Sandy Hook, if you would like to elaborate a bit.
Sandy Hook was probably one of the first most notable after Columbine of school shooting tragedies in our country. It happened in December of 2012, where 20 first graders and 6 staff in the school of Sandy Hook Elementary in Newtown, Connecticut were killed. And to this day, it just is one of those tragedies when there are school shootings or anything that is referred back to. It was just horrific.
Yes. Please continue that. Yes.
Anyway, with my business development background, I just saw this gap that everybody cared. Like, there's not one person in the world that didn't have empathy and compassion for that town of Sandy Hook, Connecticut, when those 20 first graders were killed. But yet people didn't know how to respond. And the way people responded was anything but helpful. Warehouses were filled with stuff, right? I think it was like 70,000 teddy bears were sent to a town of 20,000 people. And it added a burden. And so it took me on this deep dive of how humans support and care for each other, and how in our world of really focusing on emotions, our emotions in this case didn't matter. It was what our actions were. So over the last 10 years, I've really done a deep dive into skill training, and the research that I've done basically says you've got to teach someone the skills before they're going to feel the emotion. So you can feel an emotion and you need to know what skills to apply, or maybe you're not feeling that emotion. And if you apply the skills, you actually will feel the emotion. So our research was around the topic of a pro-social and compassionate behavioral intervention. It's a scientific term. And really, what are the skills? I think when we talk about those scenarios, when you started the podcast, of these awkward silences, these nuances, how do you be with someone that's struggling? How do you do that? You don't feel equipped. You feel like you're going to say the wrong thing. You feel like you're going to make the situation worse. And so we dove into this space called the awkward zone. These are very identifiable behavioral patterns and mindsets that we can tag, and we can say, hey, this is what's happening. Apply these actions to it, and you'll get through that. So that's what I've studied for the last 12 years. Human behaviors, the emotions around care, but way beyond the emotions, we need skills today. When you're in a workplace, those conversations might have been happening on the worst day of your life. And if you've got someone on your team that needs your support, you have to know what to do regardless of what your emotions are. So in order to have workplaces that really get to the core of good relationships, and employees feeling like they're getting the support they need so they can perform at their best, we have to know the actions, how to apply in these awkward and nuanced spaces.
That's great. A lot to unwrap on this. So from your journey, as you mentioned, that Sandy Hook was one of the pivotal when you start thinking about it. Now, human emotions is definitely something most of the time is reactive in nature. So when you mention about developing skills, so that intrigued, because every human has emotions, because that's what we are, human beings. But the thing is how to channelize it and try to kind of use them in a way that which is advantage to you or other people as well. What do you think about that skill set? Because when you're emotional, you're not rational. So is it something like, most of the time, is it something like, so when we develop those skills, what do you mean by that?
Well, let's take you're a leader and you have someone in front of you. There's going to be a lot of reasons why your emotions are frustration. Your emotion might be sadness. Your emotion might be anger, whatever it is that you're feeling towards this employee. You have to know how to respond. So the goal is, first of all, to create an awareness around what this gap is, right? If we look at this gap of people generally consider themselves good people, right? I'm an empathetic, I'm a compassionate person. I care. I'm a good person. Yet we know that over 80% of people in the workplace right now don't feel that they're understood, that they're heard, that they're seen. They're feeling crushed under the weight of work. And so then what is that gap? Obviously, we're doing something wrong. And so we could talk all day about this gap, but just from a high level, there are emotional barriers. There are things that we talk ourselves out of doing at all. So think of the case that you started with. You've got someone, you're frustrated, you're angry. In your mind, you might say, I'm not going there. I don't want to make it worse. It's not my job. Someone else is skilled at this. I got my own problems. I'm not going there. I'm just going to stay at the task at hand and get this meeting over with, right? Mm-hmm. Those are mindset barriers. Now, in order for someone to be better at leadership in those scenarios, they have to recognize either I'm doubting what to do. It's much more fear driven, or I'm deflecting. I'm just not going there. It's just water off a duck's back, right? It's just not even, that's not me. So the awareness of what am I doing here? Am I deflecting or am I just doubting? That's the first thing. And then knowing, you have to have frameworks for how do you have this conversation? How do you deal with an employee like this? It should be as black and white as the handbook, right? And that we can do that. But the second layer is our own responding behaviors. If you're having a conversation and that person walks away saying they have no idea what I'm dealing with, and you've been talking with them, you either will have tried to jump in and just solve, fix, right? Yeah. Not allowing that person to feel heard and validated, or you will have just avoided it altogether. You would have stuck at the tasks at hand. So we have mindset barriers, and we also have action barriers. And so the key to start is to recognize where we fall into these barriers, and they'll be different for every situation. They'll be different for if you're in an incredibly stressful time in your life, your barriers will be different than if you're not. And so these are just awareness of our mindsets, habits, and behaviors in any given scenario and how we're responding. Then we go deeper. Then you have to have that playbook of skills. You have to have the conversation frameworks. You have to have knowing what kind of skills you can work with an employee going through a difficult time. You have to have those at your fingertips, that you have the confidence in knowing what to do so that you can break through that frustration or that doubt or that awkwardness that is in that nuanced space.
Got it. So in a nutshell, obviously the first thing is the leaders or anyone who is kind of trying to be a leader, they should have self-awareness is one of the key things, because everyone is different and they have different way of, I would say, the showing emotions and all. So self-awareness is the one, and then also prepared with certain kind of frameworks and those questions that if certain kind of situation arises, what kind of things they should be asking or thinking about it so that it becomes a part of their muscle memory. And they should be more, I would say, aware of those questions as well. I mean, that is maybe the preliminary step, and then obviously we develop over there. Is that maybe an accurate?
Yeah. I mean, that's from a human behavioral standpoint, that's the first step. However, if you want to go back one more step, it's the awareness of why is our workplace changing, right? Yeah. Because if you don't have that, if you're not understanding why is the workplace today different than the workplace was when I was trained up as a leader, if that awareness is not there, you're never going to be able to even tackle that awkward zone because you're still not going to understand why it's critical for you as a leader to do this.
That's so profound. Yeah, we are looking at like how we have what would be the solution looks like, but how exactly all these things develop. So that is an interesting segue to talk about this part. Post 2020, after the pandemic, a lot of things has changed. A lot of offices, industries who have never even envisioned going remote started working on that. And then a lot of youngsters and the fresh grads, they started their career working remotely. So in their fresh developing mind of the corporate world, for example, they are working alone. They have only those collaborative platforms like Teams and Slack. And that's what their experience is. Versus, for example, me, I have seen all those things of going to office every day to now working remote. So I'm blessed with those wide perspective. So how exactly, I mean, in those scenarios, if I would say maybe let's take a different turn for the young people. They have their own needs in that way that people aren't able to understand to their leadership. Now, leaders may not be having all the right way of looking at it. What's your advice to the youngsters at this point when their leaders aren't able to understand because of these cultural or not maybe say generational gap of the way how they started their work?
Well, one of the reasons why I wrote Lifting Up is because I do think it has to be on leaders to do this. I think the younger generations right now are dealing with a lot of different social anxieties and not as good of relational skills as previous generations were. And I think leaders have to take charge here and recognize these younger generations were given screens in their hand. They didn't ask for it. They've grown up in a totally different way. And in my book, I break it up. We've got the native analogs and the native digitals. I don't like to peg generations. This isn't a Gen Z thing. This is generations that were raised face to face, voice to voice, person to person, versus generations that were raised with a screen in their hand. And I would, in the book, I also point out that even those that had a screen in their hand, there's a difference. And my youngest daughter just graduated college. I have two daughters older than that. The two daughters older than that still made their friends face to face, voice to voice, because they went through, even though they had technology, they didn't have to use technology to find their friendships. My youngest daughter did. So this generation, she's one of those first years that literally, and we as parents were clueless. We're like, oh, hey, look, you get a better phone than your sisters had. I can text you now. This is awesome. We can FaceTime. Thought it was a better thing. But that generation that's just graduating college, these guys are just entering the workforce. And the people after that have very high social anxiety, very low networking skills. There's a palpable difference between these generations because they had to make friends on a screen. And so I think, I've had to learn to parent totally different. I've had to learn to look at things totally different. And I think that that's what we have to put that lens on, that as these new people coming out of college come into our workplace, we as native analogs cannot think we know what it's like to be them. We can't. We have no idea what it's like to be them. So when we have this mentality to say, hey, come on, I had to do that when I was your age, that's not the right thing. They're going to look at you like you have two heads. Like, no, you don't. And if you talk to anyone from that generation, they were raised in a totally different way. They look at social connections totally different. They look at how do you gain status and recognition amongst your peers in a way that native analogs wouldn't understand. And so we have to embrace that. We have to recognize that, hey, they know a lot more in that space than we do. But they also have to recognize that the native analogs have these human skills that unfortunately are underdeveloped because of they were the guinea pigs here, and us adults didn't recognize what was happening as it was going through. So now leaders kind of have to step up and say, hey, it's our fault. We've done this to you. Let's get you some networking. I want to introduce you to this person. And, those are the kind of things we have to be looking for.
That's so profound about living. I always, I have a 9-year-old son and 4-year-old daughter. And sometimes I do fall into that trap when, again, that emotional thing, right? When I was at your age, I have done X, Y, right? So I totally understand that sometimes we do that, but then obviously you have to get some realization as well. My question is, isn't that something which is natural across all the different, like if we talk to our parents or maybe grandparents, they have their own set of ways, like my grandparents actually, they mentioned that they used to walk to school. So now that is totally different perspective. I used to bike.
Right.
These kids use all those e-bikes. So what's your say that, there's always a friction amongst different generations. So what's your take on that?
Yeah. Oh, no, there always is, right? I feel so old now. It's crazy. And I think there always will be that, use of emojis is an example, right? Like some of these things, it's just, words and phrases that are used or, I am so old. However, I think the area that I'm focused on here is actual human relational skills. And they're underdeveloped in that generation because they have been raised up on screens. So, a lot of times in the workplace as leaders, we need people to know how to be good communicators. We need people to know how to network. We need people to know how to speak up when they need something. We need to be able to make sure that not only are we informing people, but that we're truly communicating and getting through. And those skills are so critical as, there's kind of three factors merging in right now. One would be the technology is just going so fast now that we have AI and all these things, right? That's one factor. Another factor is just world events. And as we've gone through the post-pandemic to world events, to national events, climate events, whatever you want to say, this has brought in another, not always divisive, but fearful, anxious, element into the world. And the third is generational differences. And so as you look at these three things, it's kind of created what we term as VUCA. I don't know if you've heard that term, but the world is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Uh-huh. And when the world is that way, people are feeling that way. When they're feeling that way, they need guidance and assistance to get through that uncertainty. And so all of these factors are coming together in a way that the new workplace is different than the old. And so it just needs some human reskilling as we navigate this new way forward.
Yeah. And I think that reminds me, it's a paradox as well, that while people may be anxious or they are indecisive, at the same time, they are decisive when they have certain opinions based on social media, because whatever you see, those things keeps coming. And sometimes, funny enough, even I talked to my parents and they said, this is the way. I said, no, because you're looking at certain things. Mm-hmm. Those feeds always comes and you think that is, I think there is a psychological term by Daniel Kahneman about this. What you see is always, there is like, you have those availability bias. You think about those things and always think that is the world. And we have to break out from that. So coming back to that leadership thing and helping the young people, they may be the other side of the spectrum. They would be like, why everyone is teaching us or why we are being held, like as if we are not ready yet. How exactly deal with that? Because you understanding like what the context is. Sometimes like, okay, everyone is there to help us, which means that we are those people in a digital age that always need help, or is it something they can get something good out of us from as well?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think the main thing to understand is leadership is never about prying or forcing things.
Yes.
I think what we have to do is look at what's happening, right? So when we talk about those factors coming together in our VUCA world, we've found that it pretty much falls into 4 categories. Number one, leaders just aren't available anymore. Everybody is just pushed so to the max on their workload. So leaders are unavailable. Then what happens is with distributed work and with remote work, teams become more siloed because you're not seeing people. So the communication, the cross team collaboration and innovation is kind of squashed, which then leads to people don't feel safe that they can speak up. They feel kind of isolated. They feel kind of that if I speak up, I might be retaliated on or something. So, and then when you have those 3 factors, then you get to this point of overwhelm and underappreciation. So when you have this environment, we have found that people are feeling very alone. They feel very isolated. They feel, we talk about the 5 80s. The first is that people think they're good people. The second is that they don't feel seen and understood by their leaders or their peers. And the third is that they really don't tell people what they're struggling with. But the fourth is that they wish they could. So back to your point, I know from our research that people want to be able to talk about what they're dealing with. They're holding all of these challenges in. And leaders aren't available. They're stressed too much. They don't know how to tackle this space. And so you have these generations not talking to each other. So I think if the native digitals are totally fine and they're not feeling unseen and misunderstood and they're not anxious and they're doing great, fine. My book wouldn't be needed, right? But that's not what we're hearing from them. We're hearing we want to talk about our mental health in the workplace. We want our leaders to know what we're dealing with. We want to feel valued. We want to feel heard. We have things to offer here. And so that is the challenge that I'm tackling.
Got it. So from the leader's perspective, sometimes they feel that they're walking on eggshells because if they reach out, it can go either ways, which goes back to some of the things you mentioned about the skill sets, like you have to develop so that you don't have those anxiety from the leadership side. Everyone is feeling anxiety in their own terms, although no one is talking about it. So I just want to kind of reinforce that. And also, if you would like to expand that, apart from those skill set, what exactly they do to make sure that they are not getting into that domain, because everyone read through a lot of things and they say, oh, you have taken totally out of context. What's your maybe top 1, 2, 3 things for them? So that they remove all this anxiety and come more authentic, talk to their reportees. Yeah.
I think relationships always are built on a lot of small interactions, right? You think of your best friends, it's just a lot of shared experiences, a lot of conversations. And the old way at work, when you would have a one-on-one, what was it? It was an hour.
Yeah.
Or at least 30 minutes. It was never less than that. It would have a full agenda, right? And I think that there's such a fear that I don't have time for a one-on-one that people aren't having one-on-ones. So the first thing that I recommend is a fast and frequent one-on-one. Or even before the one-on-ones is making sure you're at least acknowledging people. You're at least reaching out and saying hi and what's going on. And a very basic question that can be asked every day is, hey, do you need anything? Can I support you in any way today? If every leader asked that of people that report to them every day, we would have less of this. But secondly, you need a cadence of making sure, with the number one problem we're hearing right now is leaders aren't available. And a lot of times they're not available because they're afraid it is this big thing, or they're also dealing with so much. And what we find is when you have those, a good cadence of quick, updated conversations, things get done better because you're constantly reprioritizing. And you're constantly saying, no, this needs to get done. So we have the fast and frequent framework, which is really a 10, at max 15-minute touch base. And within that, we can tackle things like we have a capacity and demand skill, which basically a leader can help someone, what's all on your plate right now? Let me help you prioritize. Okay, let's just get these 2 things done today. Can you do that? And that takes the stress off the employee for all the other things on their plate. So this is what we're talking about. And when you start having those frequent conversations in short intervals, you have a much better handle on what's all going on. And every single one of those conversations builds trust in the employee to the point where if other things come up, and the leader is always like, if there's anything that's interfering with your work, if there's any reason why you can't get your best work done, let me know. I'm here to support you. Then all of a sudden that opens the door that, well, actually my parents are going through a divorce and it's a really hard time on me, or I can't get a caregiver, all these other things that right now people are fearful for bringing up. All of a sudden those become a lot more easier to talk about because you have a leader that has already shown that they can be trusted with helping you get your work done.
Yes. That's basically what you said. If I summarize it, is have those small conversations. Don't wait for those 1 or 2 hour long, because that never comes.
Right.
And just 5-10 minutes itself it's a lot. And that basically helps you to build a trust. What would be your answer to those people who said like, oh, I have like 25, 30 people and I don't have time, seriously, to talk to them one-on-one. And I generally ask them that if they need anything, please reach out. But I cannot take those initiatives because of already so many things on my plate. What's your answer to those?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the things that has to happen, all these skills are in the book showing up that I talk about, but if that person is having that much of a burden, then they really should know how to seek support from the person above them, right? If a leader doesn't have control over the work of all of their people and can't give that guidance that's so needed of an employee, like you're setting employees up to fail. So I think if you're setting it up that literally you don't have 5 minutes for each employee over the course of a week or 2, then I think that is something that we teach how to seek support. And so there's a framework for going to your boss and saying, look, here's the challenge I'm having. I can't adequately manage these people. I don't even have time to check in with them. And if I don't have time to check in with them, they're not doing their best work. They're going to be frustrated. They're not going to feel seen and supported, and they're going to leave. We know that one of the number one areas of why people leave is they don't feel supported and cared for. Number one reason in Gen Z. And so we teach not only how to give support, but to seek it as well. So for that leader, I think those conversations have to happen with their superior to troubleshoot how can we support these people? Because I think we can all agree a leader's number one job is to cultivate talent and help people grow. And if that leader is not even able to have a 10-minute one-on-one with their employees, that's an issue.
That's an issue. That's a great point. So from your experiences, you talked to a lot of organizations, like you came to Microsoft and other organizations as well. What are some of the top questions you've been asked, which makes you think that, yeah, these are one of the most frequent questions, either from the, what do you call the data, native analog or native world people here? Yeah.
Well, I think there's so many, and it really starts, like, as we started this conversation, is just really understanding this shift, this paradigm shift in what is needed as a leader, and I think also understanding what's happening to leadership right now, because when we have these factors coming into the world today, all these changes, you can take an organization like Starbucks. I'm sure you have your own, being a technology company, your own whole thing like this. But Starbucks started out as a community meeting place for coffee. As technology comes in, now they've literally had to shift their entire model to a pickup order, right? An entire shift. And on every single one of those, it's a whole new process that has to be introduced. It's a whole new technology that has to be introduced. And every single new thing that a customer wants or doesn't want or whatever requires new processes, new technologies, new frameworks, new all of this. So that's all getting pushed on the senior leaders. Like, we've got to update this. We've got to put this new system in. We need this new thing to stay up to date. Now it's AI. It's all these things, right? So senior leaders are just, they're done. I think 30% of senior leaders want out, right? So it's just becoming all too much to be able to strategize and put into place all these new things that are needed. Then the middle managers get squished, right? Because the senior leaders don't have the time for them. So they're just getting squished. They're frustrated. They feel ghosted. They're not getting the support they need. And then on the young end, the native digitals, they don't want to lead. They don't want to manage. I think the numbers are like less than 30%, around 30% only want to seek to be a leader. And of that, only 4% seek to be C-suite leaders. So I think what we have to ask ourselves is, who's going to lead us through this? And who are these brave people going to be to keep this human element and keep people calm and hopeful and on track and guiding them through this all? That's why I wrote this book. So as I go out to organizations, it's helping people connect the dots, because we all feel this, but it's like, what's happening? What do I do? There's so much uncertainty. There's so much complexity. And what my contribution is to this is, let's know how to support each other a little better. Let's make sure we have processes and systems in place that we can find the time to listen, that we have the frameworks, that we know how to have the conversations, that we have simple tools to check in on people, that we can make sure people are feeling understood. And when we know that when people feel understood and supported, their performance is far better, their loyalty is much higher, and their retention is stronger. So to me, this is the future of organizations being able to maintain and attract the best talent. And a lot of organizations I go to, this is future. It's considered future proofing the workforce.
That's cool. So, talking about those technologies, as you mentioned on the Starbucks, what's your perspective on AI? There must be some conversations around like AI would displace jobs and all. Have you gone through that in some of your conversations, and how you take that in your conversations to make sure that, I mean, I would say, what's your perspective on these technologies coming and the impact on the human beings?
Yeah, I think it's happening very fast. I think there's a lot of confusion. I think that AI to some people will be looked at as the same as support from a human. I think that people are having conversations with AI. People are looking to AI to help counsel them. And I think there's going to be a fine line. I'm not quite sure where that fine line is going to be. In what we do, I will always focus on training human to human, because I feel that as AI continues to grow, it's going to be more and more awkward to be around people. And we have to know how to break through that awkwardness. And so I think it's happening fast. I know I've worked with some AI companies, and I'm not an expert, but I just know that there's going to be a lot of need for training human skills as AI ramps up.
That's so, I so much resonate, because that's personally, I believe as well, that as we incorporate more AI, those mechanical work would be offloaded as we go ahead, and maybe from the, I would say, pretty junior level, but those interpersonal skills, human connection, critical thinking, that's what we were discussing about how to cultivate with to the people who are working with those leaders. It's so important, actually. So yeah, definitely that is something we definitely have to consider that. But towards the tapering end of our conversations, is there anything still, I mean, you're still battling with? While you mentioned about these, you already wrote a book. But there are still a few things you're still figuring out and working as we speak.
Well, I think working around AI is a big one, right? And understanding where this fits in. I mean, I think there will be such confusion, and not even confusion as much as a human desire for more connection, and more people are just having their conversations with AI. But again, the reason I wrote a leader book is we're going to need leaders to bring people together to talk about innovative ways to continue to grow and build and create and innovate and collaborate. And that is all going to be getting people off screens. I mean, there will be tools on screens to do that, but we're already seeing from, the distributed work and the remote work, the challenges we have to create those interpersonal deep relationships, right? It's just not the same. And so that's the challenge, because I don't know what's going to happen. I think it's going to develop very fast. And I see and hear people talking about how AI is going to have empathy. I mean, I don't know. I know that there is so much energy and differences between an in-person relationship that you could never replicate with a screen, that we need to stay true to. So that, I think, is what I'm struggling with. But that I wouldn't even say struggling, because it just makes me double down more on why I think these human skills are so needed going forward.
Oh, definitely. So one last question, I think I just forgot to ask this back in, what the native analog people should learn from native digital at this point? What exactly they lack, what they really excel at this point? Yes.
I think to recognize that native digitals are so quick and efficient in how they can connect with different people. They look at connecting and collaborating in new and unique ways that it has a great place. I believe a lot in cross mentoring. And I believe that we're faced right now with the native digitals that have a wonderful grasp of a world that native analogs don't. And native analogs have a wonderful grasp of a world that native digitals don't. And so cross mentoring those groups together will result in a much better collaborative, innovative environment, versus leadership saying, my way or the highway, and leave your personal issues at the door. And, like the old task-driven leadership mentality way.
Yes, I think that's pretty good, because obviously we both have to learn from each other. As you mentioned, that the native digital are more fast, efficient, and they know the work to do it rather quickly because of the way. And you also mentioned about the connection, which is also interesting, that while they may have a better digital connection, maybe the native analog has more human connection. So how we can make it a balance to make sure that we are not tilting on either side heavily and missing out the goodness of the other side.
No, and it's true. Like if we look at data coming out of colleges right now, the loneliness factor of students in colleges is outrageously high. When we look at current leaders in the workplace, age 35 and over, if we ask them if they're lonely, it sits at about 11%, like doesn't even hit the scale. In colleges right now, coming out of colleges, we're looking at loneliness rates over 75%. So that's what I'm talking about. And because there's such a social anxiety. There's they've learned how to communicate on screens. They like to stay behind their screen, but then they feel like they don't have the skills to know how to make friends and how to network and how to go out. So in many cases, as leaders, we'll see people pull back, like a very talented person that can be incredible with writing and slacking and emails, and you get in person with them and they shut down. And these are all the things we need to look for. They're incredibly talented people that don't have the same skill set. And also they look at native analogs as saying, oh my gosh, these guys don't even know how to use this. Right? So there is this deep need, and native analogs really need to pull native digitals out of this loneliness hole.
Great. So I think we had a good conversation. We could have gone, but again, for the longer duration, I think in summary, it's all about a mutual understanding and then kind of a give and take relationship. learn from each other without having those biases or some of the way that because we are a leader, we have to educate the other people and not taking anything from them as well. I think that's where one of the good standing over there. We discuss a lot of ways, and I think you did mention about the framework and obviously your book, which is already available. And so, yeah, please, can you just help us knowing towards the end? First is what is the like the full book's name, where we can find it, and where we can connect with you as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, my name is Jen Marr. I do most of my social media on LinkedIn. I have a weekly or usually weekly, bi-weekly LinkedIn live program that I bring guests on. I'll have to have you on sometime, actually. My book is Lifting Up, the Transformative Power of Supportive Leadership. It's available everywhere. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's available ebook, hardcover, softcover. And it's also available on my own website, which is showingup.com, but it's showing with a dash up.com. So please visit the website where you can learn more about our program offerings. We're actually a training organization. So we certify people to go out and train. We have workshops, we have webinars, and we have certification skill training in order to skill up in this area.
Wonderful, that's great. So please, and obviously when this episode would be aired, we will provide some links so that you can connect with Jen as well and all the information. That being said, Jen, again, thank you so much for
Thank you, Saurabh.
providing at least. I assume that all the audience and listeners for this podcast, at least what we always say, that they will have a right direction and think about it. And again, we are not providing solutions, we are providing direction. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Saurabh.